Have the Montreal Canadiens finally reached the point where desperation meets ambition? And if so, are they about to make the most audacious move in franchise history? The air in Montreal is thick with anticipation, frustration, and an unmistakable hunger for relevance. The Canadiens, a storied franchise that has tasted championship glory more than any other NHL team, find themselves at a crossroads that could define the next decade of hockey in Quebec. And at the center of this swirling vortex of speculation stands one name that sends shivers down the spine of every hockey purist: Sidney Crosby. This isn't just another rumor mill churning out clickbait fantasies. This is a legitimate conversation being had in NHL front offices, sparked by none other than the Athletic's respected insider Chris Johnston, who recently threw gasoline on the fire by suggesting Montreal should go all in for the Pittsburgh Penguins captain if the opportunity ever materializes. But let's pump the brakes for just a moment and examine the landscape that has brought us to this extraordinary juncture. The Canadiens entered this season with legitimate playoff aspirations, a statement that would have seemed laughable just 2 years ago. Nick Suzuki has blossomed into a bona fide number one center. Cole Caulfield continues to light the lamp with alarming regularity. The defense, anchored by promising young talent, shows flashes of brilliance. Yet something remains maddeningly incomplete about this roster. Then came the injuries. Kirby Dach, the former third overall pick acquired to bolster the center depth, went down. Dach and Newhook followed suit. Suddenly, the forward group that looked serviceable now appears dangerously thin, exposing cracks that could derail an entire season's worth of progress. Management's response? Signing Alexander Texier, a perfectly fine depth move that addresses approximately 0% of the team's actual needs. It's the equivalent of putting a Band-Aid on a compound fracture. Texier brings speed and some offensive upside, but he's not moving the needle for a team that believes it can compete for a playoff spot in the brutally competitive Eastern Conference. The front office knows it. The coaching staff knows it. Most importantly, the fan base, one of the most passionate and demanding in professional sports, knows it. The Canadiens need a significant upgrade, and they need it now. Sidney Crosby is 38 years old. Let that sink in for a moment. The player who revolutionized the center position, who dragged the Penguins to 3 Stanley Cup championships, who has been the face of the NHL for nearly 2 decades, is approaching the twilight of his career. And yet here's the absolutely maddening part. He's still playing like he's in his prime. Through the early portion of this season, Crosby continues to produce at an elite level, demonstrating the hockey IQ, playmaking ability, and competitive fire that have defined his Hall of Fame career. He's not just surviving, he's thriving, willing a Penguins team that many predicted would crater into respectability. Pittsburgh's surprising start has temporarily silenced the rebuild talk that dominated the offseason. When a team features Crosby and Evgeny Malkin defying Father Time simultaneously, you don't just blow it up. But here's the uncomfortable truth that Penguins management must confront. This success is unsustainable. The roster around their aging superstars remains flawed, the prospect pipeline is barren, and the salary cap situation offers little flexibility. At some point, perhaps this season, perhaps next, Pittsburgh will face the inevitable reckoning. And when that moment arrives, Crosby will have a decision to make. Does he want to spend his final years watching a rebuild unfold around him? Or does he want one last legitimate shot at championship glory? Chris Johnston didn't casually toss out the Canadiens-Crosby connection. There's genuine logic underpinning the speculation. Montreal possesses the organizational depth to construct a compelling trade package without completely gutting their future. They have multiple first-round picks at their disposal, a prospect pool that ranks among the league's best, and the kind of young NHL talent that could entice Pittsburgh into pulling the trigger. Imagine the package. 2 first-round picks, perhaps 2026 and 2027, a top prospect like Oliver Kapanen, or even defenseman Kaiden Guhle, and additional mid-round selections to sweeten the pot. It's a king's ransom, but for Sidney Crosby, even a 38-year-old version, it might be justified. From Crosby's perspective, Montreal offers something Pittsburgh cannot. A team on the upswing with legitimate Stanley Cup aspirations in the near term. He'd slot in behind Suzuki, creating a devastating 1-2 punch down the middle. His veteran presence, leadership, and championship pedigree would accelerate the development of Montreal's young core. And let's not ignore the romantic element. Crosby, a Nova Scotia native, finishing his career in the most hockey-obsessed city on the planet. But here's where the cold, harsh reality intrudes on the fairy tale. Is 1 year of Sidney Crosby worth mortgaging significant portions of your future? Let's be brutally honest about what the Canadiens would be surrendering. Multiple first-round picks represent potential franchise cornerstones. Oliver Kapanen, currently tearing up the AHL, projects as a top-6 forward with two-way excellence. Kaiden Guhle has already established himself as a legitimate top-4 defenseman at just 23 years old. David Reinbacher, the 5th overall pick in 2023, carries the potential to anchor Montreal's blue line for the next decade. Trading these assets for a 38-year-old player under contract for one more season, regardless of his name or accomplishments, represents an enormous gamble. Yes, Crosby remains elite. Yes, his hockey sense and skill level appear immune to aging. But we're talking about a player who will be 39 during the 2026 playoffs, assuming Montreal even gets there. The psychological component cannot be ignored. Would acquiring Crosby galvanize the locker room, providing the veteran leadership and championship mentality that transforms good teams into great ones? Absolutely. Would his presence elevate Suzuki, Caulfield, and the other young stars, teaching them what it takes to win at the highest level? Without question. But what happens if Crosby suffers a significant injury? What if his production finally falls off the cliff, as it inevitably must for every aging superstar? What if Montreal trades away their future for one playoff run that falls short, leaving them in no man's land for the next half-decade? From Pittsburgh's standpoint, trading Sidney Crosby represents an almost unfathomable proposition. He is the franchise. He saved hockey in Pittsburgh. He delivered 3 championships. He's been loyal to a fault, never leveraging his status to force a trade or demand a better supporting cast. But loyalty doesn't win championships, and sentimentality doesn't rebuild rosters. If the Penguins are serious about retooling for long-term success, moving Crosby, with his blessing, might be the most responsible decision management could make. The return from Montreal would jumpstart a rebuild that currently lacks direction and assets. The haul would be substantial: multiple first-rounders to restock the prospect pool, young NHL-ready talent to build around, and the flexibility to finally move on from the contracts that have hamstrung the organization. It's a painful but necessary surgery that every dynasty eventually must perform. Here's where we separate the romantics from the pragmatists. If you're the Canadiens front office, you have to ask yourself one fundamental question. Are we one Sidney Crosby away from being a legitimate Stanley Cup contender? If the answer is an emphatic yes, if you genuinely believe that adding Crosby transforms this team from playoff hopeful to championship favorite, then you make the deal and worry about the consequences later. Championships are rare, and windows of opportunity close faster than anyone anticipates. You don't get many chances to acquire a player of Crosby's caliber, regardless of age. But if there's any hesitation, any doubt that even with Crosby this team remains a year or 2 away from true contention, then you protect your assets and continue building organically. The worst possible outcome is surrendering your future for a rental that delivers 1 playoff appearance and no championship. The reality is that Montreal probably sits somewhere in between. They're better than expected, but not yet elite. They have exciting young talent, but lack the depth and experience of true contenders. Adding Crosby would undoubtedly accelerate their timeline, but it wouldn't guarantee anything. There's another element to consider that transcends analytics and asset management. What would Sidney Crosby mean to Montreal? We're talking about a city that lives and breathes hockey, where the Canadiens aren't just a sports team, but a cultural institution. Acquiring arguably the greatest player of his generation would create a frenzy unlike anything the NHL has seen in decades. The Bell Center would be electric. The media coverage would be suffocating. The pressure would be immense. For a young core still learning how to win, That environment could be either transformative or crushing. Crosby's experience navigating intense scrutiny would prove invaluable, but there's no guarantee that Suzuki, Caulfield, and company are ready for that level of expectation. As we stand here in late November 2025, the Sidney Crosby trade speculation remains exactly that speculation. Pittsburgh's solid start has temporarily tabled any rebuild discussions. Crosby has given no indication he wants out. Montreal continues searching for upgrades, but hasn't made any aggressive moves. Yet, the conversation persists because the fit makes too much sense to ignore. If circumstances change, if Pittsburgh stumbles, if Crosby opens his mind to a change of scenery, if Montreal continues exceeding expectations, this could evolve from fantasy to reality frighteningly quickly. Should the Canadiens pursue Crosby if given the opportunity? The analytical part of my brain screams caution. The romantic part whispers, imagine the possibilities. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Montreal should absolutely explore the possibility, but only if the price remains reasonable and Crosby commits to more than just one season. A sign-and-trade scenario where Crosby agrees to a 2-year extension changes the entire calculus. Suddenly, you're not trading for a rental, but for a legitimate difference maker who could bridge the gap between promising young team and championship contender. Without that commitment, the risk likely outweighs the reward, no matter how tantalizing the prospect of Sidney Crosby in a Canadian sweater might be. What do you think? Should Montreal go all in for Sidney Crosby, or would it be a reckless gamble that could haunt them for years? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most fascinating potential trades in recent NHL history, smash that like button and let's keep this conversation going. The hockey world is watching Montreal, and the next move they make could define a generation.